Well, Ellena, thank you so much for helping with my project. I was wondering if we could start off by maybe you saying a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a senior at Georgetown University, and I am an international politics and journalism major. And as you know, I've started to, well, not started to, that was last year. I'm about to publish a book about space and human curiosity in space, um, as well as the politics and prejudice involved when it comes to space. So it's a really exciting time to be writing about space because, so many projects are ahead, very, very big projects for humanity. Yeah, so it's been a really exciting few months writing this book. And yeah, that's a little bit about myself and the projects I've been working on.
I were saying that there's a lot of projects ahead for humanity. Which ones are top of mind for you?
Um, well, the big ones are the plans to go to the moon and Mars, and also the rate at which privatized companies are developing technologies to make going to space more accessible for people like you and me who don't necessarily have the career skills to fly off to space tomorrow. Conventionally, those are reserved for people, who've dedicated their entire life to NASA and like flying off to zero gravity. But it's it's almost like feasible now to dream about actually going um, to space, like in maybe even 20 years time, for ordinary people. So yeah,
Is that something you dream of doing?
I think I the first time I actually remember dreaming about going to space was when I was really young, like I'm pretty sure in first grade. The first female Korean astronaut. Actually, she was just the first Korean astronaut to fly into space, but she also happened to be a woman. She flew off, and the whole family watched in front of those really thick TVs back then. They were like this small, and we were like all right up to the screen, like eating fried chicken and just watching the rocket blast off. I remember feeling so inspired and then asking my mom, like, how can I go to space like her? Her name was Kim So Young, and she's like a legend. But I remember also hearing a response from my mom, like, you won't last a day in an astronaut suit because of your eczema. I used to have like really bad eczema when I was a kid, and I couldn't like fathom like the idea of being stuck in a suit where I couldn't scratch myself. But obviously, like, I'm an adult now, and I'm thinking of different problems when it comes to going to space. But yeah, I would love to go to space. It would be such an amazing opportunity to see Earth from that point of view.
And you, I just looking at the full name of your book, Into the Unknown: Human Curiosity, Politics, and Prejudice in the True Space Age. Um, I was wondering if we could like break down some of the parts of that title. So whenever you say the true space age, can you tell me what you mean?
Yeah, so I love that we're talking about this because a lot of people, I think, are becoming more educated on space. People like me who actually didn't have that much knowledge on space prior to researching this book, I think it's always crept on my mind that there has been more news and more like advancements when it comes to space technology in the past, let's say, decade. Um, and like I've almost see like when I see the news, there's um, like the politics, the life, the technology, and now there's almost like a section for space. And it wasn't always like that. It seems like space was always um, so far from the ordinary news, but it's not anymore because of the recent developments like SpaceX, the big projects that are partnered with NASA in terms of going to the moon, to Mars, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic. Like there are huge projects that are happening, and that's what I personally thought. But then, while writing this book, I got the great opportunity to actually talk to astrobiologists, people who actually work for NASA, people who are currently studying like aero engineering when it comes to space, uh, and it's clear to them too that this is the new space age, and to them the true space age, because we're making advancements at a historically unprecedented rate. So I write a little bit about this in my book, how we need to really pay attention now because we're making those advancements that matter to us um, for perhaps like centuries to come. These are like landmark advancements that we need to pay attention to. It's not like, well, I don't want to exactly compare the two space ages, like now and then the ones in the 60s and 70s when people were stepping on the moon for the first time. I'd say like those are like huge advancements for their time too. But the advancements we're making now is the ones that could really make a difference in terms of what humanity is, that could define humanity for us as a species in, um, let's think big, like the galaxy. So yeah, that's why I write the true space age.
That is awesome. And, that aligns a lot with my thinking too. I feel like the 2020s are going to be to space exploration and transportation development that the 1990s were to the computer and to the internet. Um, I mean, in 1990, it would be probably easier to explain to somebody why astronauts float than what email is or web shopping. Yeah. And then by 2000, it's something that everybody knew about. And
Yeah.
it's kind of neat. And you talk about um, human curiosity, politics, and prejudice. Um, so can you talk a little bit about why you chose those three words?
hmm So I actually wrote this book for my brother. Um, I was in quarantine with him beginning of last year when COVID hit Korea, and he's the one who really inspired my whole journey with space. He is a huge space um, connoisseur. Like he can tell you so many trivial facts when it comes to NASA, science fiction when it comes to space and rockets and the idea of aliens. Like he's obsessed with the whole universe. And through him, like I got to know a little bit more from quarantine. But then uh, he got a little sick, and it was hard for me to communicate with him for a while. So I decided to write this book for him because it was a great way for us to reconnect and talk. So I really got to see space through the eyes of a young kid. He's a high schooler, and his passion for space and his curiosity for space is so pure and so just grand that it's really just inspiring to anyone who listens to him. And I wanted to um, bring that to the book, that perspective, that fresh-eyed, young child perspective. When you're like so passionate about this one thing, it keeps you up until 4 a.m. watching YouTube videos and researching articles about it. Like that's him. And I think that's the perspective all of us should have when it comes to space in the true space age. It's we should be like cherishing um, the times we're living right now, because we are seeing things that history will remember forever. And we should not sleep on it. So that's why I write curiosity, because it's easy to like Google search about space and see the most recent news, but feel kind of like meh about it. Like, that's cool, but that doesn't matter really to me. It does matter. Like, it matters to who you are, who we are as a collective species, and for your children and their children. And it's a matter as pertinent to us as climate change, or, US politics if you're American. So that's why I write curiosity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, it's amazing how much we have going for us as civilization right now. I mean, I think we're probably able to produce all the food that we need to feed everybody in the world. It's just a distribution problem we have some trouble with. And probably have the technology to allow everybody to be educated and be in contact with each other. But even in countries like the U.S., where a lot of people are fairly well off, you see a lot of discontent, and it seems like material comforts has nothing to do with happiness.
Hmm.
How come you think people are so discontent? Like, why aren't people celebrating kind of like these events that we could be doing together? Well, I think this goes into the politics part, and the prejudice part of your title is how come we aren't all coming together as like a world and going out and marching out into the rest of the solar system as united peoples?
Yeah. So um, I want to like refer to a conversation I had with a really famous astrobiologist who works for SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And that's an organization that's dedicated to detecting alien radio signals. And he was part of the team that wrote the first protocol for what to do if we do detect aliens. And I got to read through that protocol and the revised protocol that was written in the past couple of years. And they both are very, like, they both do not touch upon international collaboration that much. And I pointed it out to him. And he was quick to acknowledge that, yes, there is a huge lack of um, collaboration when it comes to um, aliens, but also more generally space. Like, it tends to be, and it's growing to be more and more specific to the countries. It's becoming almost political, and it's almost like a race, again, like a space race between nations, and there is more competitiveness than collaboration. And that also extends from an institutional level to the individual level. I think people tend to view space as either too far from their reach to connect to, or just very specific to the individual advancements of their own country. And that's really a pity, because out in space, there are no nations and there are no borders. Um, and I think I think there needs to be a more of a middle ground where we understand space not from the perspective of a nation, like an American or a Korean, but just as a human. And I also want to briefly talk about a conversation I had with an anthropologist who dedicates her entire career to writing about space, um, and what it means from an anthropologist's perspective. And she made the point that, yes, like, out in space, like humanity becomes much more cohesive concept because we're one species. But at the same time, like we run the risk of reducing our identity to just one blob of a species. So I definitely believe that she has a point, but also that the state that we are in is too much divided. So in my book, I'm really reaching to write about that middle ground, where we embrace our identities as an individual, but try to also embrace the identity as a collective working species.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you were talking about collaboration versus competition. I mean, you kind of see a little bit of both with our return to the moon. And the first time we went to the moon was pretty much entirely an American effort. We talked about going for all mankind, but we really didn't. At this time, we have the U.S. working with Canada, working with the European countries, working with Japan, and I think a few others as well, all kind of building
Mm.
out various components of the architecture. But then you have this competition between, say, China and the US with completely independent plans and what have you. And I think there's a lot of distrust of China actually because of the system of government, the closing off of information flows between um, people in China and outside and what have you. And I think to a lot of people, those things are not easy to are not possible to work with. And I was just wondering if you saw um, some way forward that would allow for, say, China and Europe and the U.S. and what have you to all work together, or if you think the differences are too big.
Yeah, that's a question I've been asking myself, if I'm being honest. I really wanted to offer some sort of, like, not a solution because I'm in no position to give such a concrete solution, but maybe like a few thoughts on how this could change. And to do this, I really like reached out to my um peers I know who are currently working in like the UN Space Agency, who do understand a more international perspective, a collaborative perspective on space policy. And unfortunately, this one guy who actually works for the UN Space Agency did uh, tell me that it is much too idealistic to think that we're in any position to believe China, US, and Russia could collaborate on something as big as, you know, like say going to Mars first. Um, if anything, it's going to stay a race. And that really bummed me, and I wanted to push back, but no, I don't know if there is a way right now. I think like the biggest change that could come is going to be from the people, like to make space more accessible of a concept to the ordinary people, and to start dialogue from like the individual level, so that we understand what's happening exactly with our federal agencies working on space. And I really think if we were more informed and more curious and engaged with space and space technology, we will be able to, excuse me, push for our space agencies to work in a less nationalist way and more of an international way. But that is also, some will say, an idealist point of view.
And would you see as being like the first steps towards that?
Um, I think we need to make space uh, like an ideal ground for like entrepreneurs. Like I think as a young college student who's about to graduate and enter the workforce, like I don't see a lot of students like ambitiously going for space as like a fresh ground to enter and engage with. A lot of them immediately head for like NASA or like immediately like sign up for like SpaceX. I've talked to a few space entrepreneurs and they have said that space entrepreneur is really hard because right now there is so much politics involved and you really need to be supported by the government to enter that field. But if it was more accessible um, from an economic level, like from a business level, I think the dialogue could be more open to young people like me whose voice like matter because we're just entering the work field.
That makes sense. And it's yeah, it's kind of interesting. Jeff Bezos, he has a space company, Blue Origin, and he was talking about sort of his goals was to put the infrastructure in place that would allow for space entrepreneurs to go and access space more easily. He points out that a couple of people in college can get together and start an online business or something on the internet, but the idea of them actually starting a space company is almost impossible because the costs are so huge. And he says that if they had if it weren't for the fact that we had credit card payments and we had the ability to use like FedEx and UPS and what have you deliver books, and the internet didn't exist, then it'd be impossible to create Amazon, which basically just allowed for you to bring those three things together.
Yeah, it's really a pity that companies like Amazon and Tesla, which are companies that benefited from the infrastructure that already existed and easily skyrocketed into these huge, huge companies, are the only ones who are able to create space companies right now. And and now like we don't like say space entrepreneurs don't have the infrastructure to benefit from that to become as influential in the field as Amazon and Tesla did.
Yeah, that's true. There is a little bit of kind of growth in this area. The Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, or CLIPS, they call it.
Oh,
Um, Basically, NASA, instead of building a rocket and a lander and what have you to put its probes and science equipment on the moon, it actually contracted out or had a process where they had a number of companies bid to take that to the moon. So that would fund the majority of the mission. But then
mm,
these companies can do whatever they want to with the additional capacity. And one of the companies that's landing a probe on the moon this year is Astrobotic in Pittsburgh, and they'll send a package for anybody to the moon. Like, I'm actually taking this video and I'm putting a little micro SD card right there, and it'll be going to the moon later this year. Um, and there's been a couple of other companies that have kind of um, built a few little micro space businesses around this, if you will. One that will send your DNA to the moon for you, uh, and then another one that will send like your ashes to the moon. For if you had somebody that you wanted to honor in that way. And I think there's a few other kind of little micro businesses around that. So um, very, very small, but at least, there's a little intersection. And there's been some talk about trying to find businesses here on Earth that are space expandable, things that would make money here on Earth, but then would have applications towards space. It's kind of like a bridge. But yeah.
yeah. Do you know what kind of companies have been looking towards that?
Well, I think definitely anything around with like on-demand manufacturing,
Mhm.
because you could imagine you're on this trip to Mars and you're not going to get any resupply, and suddenly this part breaks. What do you do? So like 3D printing and that type of thing. But growing food, nutrition. Um, I even think exercise equipment. Have you heard of this thing called a tonal? Tonal. It's like this, uh, strength training piece of fitness equipment. I can see it so being perfect for like being on like the International Space Station or something because it's all based upon resistance and not on weight.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean, those are some things that I think about, but maybe it's just about creating some more infrastructure where you have like coaching and presentations and a few little contests to keep people motivated and then hook them up with funding and kind of create a whole pipeline. Uh, would it surprise you that most of the people I talk to don't know we're planning to go to the moon?
Um, well, yes, because I've been in the sphere of space for the past year, but actually no, when I think about before this, I had no idea what was ahead. And it amazed me to find out all these projects that are so ambitious and so crazy, exciting. But yeah, can you tell me more? Like how many people don't know that we're going to moon out of the ones that you've interviewed?
Oh, since March of last year, I've been interviewing a lot of people online, and there's kind of a little bit of selection bias to the people that I interview. Obviously, people that are interested in space are more likely to be willing. But before March of last year, it was people off the street, on the buses at the airports, what have you. I would say about 80% of them did not know.
Hmm.
Um, so
What like what do they say when you tell them?
I get a variety of reactions. They're like, "Wow, that's cool," or "Why is NASA keeping it a secret?" I heard one person say, but the vast majority of them probably ask, "Why? Why are we going back? What do we hope to accomplish this time? What's the purpose?" Uh,
Mhm.
and so, in terms of answering those questions, what is your favorite reason for us doing this? I mean, especially after this year of COVID, um, people's minds are probably on how to how to deal with COVID and the economy, and they
Mhm.
don't see how space is contributing to that.
Yeah, I say my most favorite reason is inspiration. Um, I did learn that sent manned missions anywhere are the most expensive and least cost effective when it comes to resources and training and technology. So they are very much a storytelling tool and a motivational tool. So I think it's so timely that we are getting close to this mission, a manned mission to the moon for the first woman and next man. Um, because as you know, like we are losing inspiration, depression rates are skyrocketing, people are getting really anxious and not motivated because of COVID. And news is really glum right now. Like I see the news and there is little to look forward to. And that's not just how I feel. Like the stats back that. So I think to see what humanity can achieve and to kind of be reminded of our power and our potential, that will be so very much what is needed. So that's my favorite reason. But I actually want to ask you, like, what's your favorite reason as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to what's your long-term view about the future of humanity. Do you see us as actually going, uh, you know, uh, having settlements in the rest of the solar system and eventually making it to another star system? Or do you see us essentially staying on Earth and we live and die as the Earth lives and dies? And for me, that first one seems like the better option. And it's like the universe is so huge, and we're on such a little micro dot of it. I can't believe we would be content with just this little bitty part whenever there's so much out there to explore and know. And going to the moon I see as being just a first step in that direction. A very small step, but definitely a definite step.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I definitely thought that we would benefit off of going to like settle in Mars. I think there is dialogue that needs to happen when it comes to like the mindset that with which we settle on these planets with. Like I know a lot of scientists believe that these are essentially like plants without sentient organisms. But like it's a very few people who are deciding whether we're expanding in such way right now. Um, the people who are in government, the people who, are in the few businesses. And it's important that we don't settle and like expand with a mindset of we're just gonna expand and we're just gonna occupy because you know what that sounds like. We're gonna conquer and we're gonna colonize. So as long as we do it in a extremely mindful and respectful way of the living organisms, sentient or not, on these planets, I don't know how feasible it is to be mindful, but that's what I hope for.
Yeah, it's a good point. And another thing about Jeff Bezos is he likes to talk about how the Earth is a really special place, and he sees space as being a way to protect the Earth, move all those Earth-harming activities off of the Earth's surface, and
Mhm.
then also maybe create these big space structures for humanity. Like maybe we don't live on planets at all. Maybe
Mhm.
we use like um, asteroids and moon mining and what have you to actually create these completely artificial worlds that are in space, and um, we stop living on planets completely.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't know Jeff Bezos thought that way. Um, I really like that idea. And I hope that means he's thinking of a way to preserve not just, us and our relationship with Earth, but also all the other living organisms on Earth. There are so many that are going to be out of the conversation when it comes to expanding outside of Earth. Like I think of dogs. Like, what are dogs gonna do when we move to space? Are we gonna bring them with us? What are we even gonna do without our best friends? So I really hope there's a way for us to conserve the ecosystem on planet Earth, in terms of not just us, but also all the other animals.
I think we do bring dogs with us, and in fact, I think if we were sending a dog to the moon, far more people would know about it.
It's an interesting idea. Why not cats?
And why not cats? I mean, that could be the great controversy. We could have some type of reality TV show, dogs or cats to the moon. Uh,
Yeah.
which kind of reminds me, there is a reality TV show that's in the works called Space Hero that aims to be a kind of a global citizen astronaut selection process.
Mm.
The person that gets selected as being um, the best fit or what have you to go. We're going to go to the International Space Station for 10 days, and it's it's going to be a global contest, a global selection process. And I was wondering what you thought about efforts like that. Do you see that as being something to really help get a lot more people interested and involved, or do you see that as kind of being a sideshow that might be distracting?
Um, I think that's a great idea. Um, as long as like it doesn't spiral and become this huge competition between countries and like we want the American to go, no, we want the Chinese to go, like, the obvious. I really hope a lot of contenders are considered from not just, the big countries when it comes to space, but pretty much any country, um, because space is should be accessible to anyone, regardless of where you're from. So yeah, I want to look into this and maybe like see like who I can recommend to apply.
That's awesome. Oh, well, I really look forward to reading your book. It's going to be out in April, right?
That's the goal.
That's the goal. Um, that's that'd be great. You have to let me know how I could get a copy.
Of course. I actually wanted to ask you, it was really fun talking to you, but I kind of want to flip and ask you the question someday, hopefully soon, because I'm writing a few chapters on what people who don't have professional careers like at NASA or astrobiology um, think about space. And I think you're a great candidate because you're this person who's so passionate about space. You've been conducting these hundreds of interviews. So, what do you think?
What do I think about space or
Or talking to me one day where I interview you.
absolutely anytime. Just let me know.
Lovely, yeah. What's the easiest way to reach out to you for to
Um,
schedule time?
Probably oh, the time is always difficult. Weekends are probably better.
Hmm.
And then you can just email me or call me. I can give you my
Okay,
phone number. So
yeah, that sounds good.
yeah, and then I think you're in touch with Steven as well. So uh, but yeah, no, I would love to. Whenever works for you, we can make it work.
Sounds great. Sounds great. I'll talk to you soon then.
Okay. Well, you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Bye bye.